द क्रिटिकल पेट्रियट देखने वाले सब दोस्तों को खुशामदीद। आज एक दफा फिर मेरे साथ शरीके गुफ्तगू हैं प्रोफेसर शिव आनंद कानवी जी। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं वो महाराष्ट्र के एक गांव में रहते हैं। इससे पहले वो एक जर्नलिस्ट रहे हैं और टीचिंग करते रहे हैं और इंडिया की आईटी और फार्मास्यूटिकल पर बहुत नॉलेजेबल आदमी हैं। तो मैं आज उनसे फार्मास्यूटिकल्स के बारे में ही बात करना चाह रहा हूँ। कान्वी जी, ये फरमाइएगा कि इंडिया की सबसे बड़ी फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी है सन फार्मा,
जी
और उसका कहा जाता है कि उसकी जो मार्केट वैल्यू है $30 बिलियन है।
जी
तो उसके अलावा और बड़े प्लेयर्स कौन से हैं? एक डॉक्टर यूसुफ हमीद हैं, उनकी है कंपनी सिप्ला के नाम से, और
जी
उनका कहा जाता है कि $12 बिलियन है उनकी इस कंपनी
जी
की वर्थ, नेटवर्थ।
जी
तो व्हाट अबाउट अदर कंपनीज, डॉक्टर रेड्डीज लैब, कौन
या
है और बड़े प्लेयर्स कौन से हैं और एक्सपोर्ट्स की क्या पोजीशन है?
या आज इंडियन फार्मा इंडस्ट्री के बारे में डिस्कशन करेंगे और आपका चैनल में मुझे इनवाइट करने के लिए शुक्रिया। आप सही फरमाएं कि सन फार्मा जो है वो सबसे बड़ा फार्मा कंपनी है and it has its net worth is about $30 billion. And next, there is a rung of 3-4 companies like Dr. Reddy's Laboratory, which is
जी।
headquartered in Hyderabad, Deccan, and
हम्म।
that is worth about $12 billion. Then there is Divi's Lab, that is also headquartered in Hyderabad. That is also
हम्म।
$12 billion. Then the Cipla, which you mentioned, which is headed by Dr. Yusuf Hamid, that is also about $12 billion. Then there are a few others: Torrent Pharma, Zydus Life Sciences. There is Lupin Laboratories, and Biocon, that is owned by actually a lady, a
हम्म।
scientist
हम्म।
called Kiran Muzumdar Shaw. There is Aurobindo Pharma and so on. So these are about, in fact, and all these are bigger than the biggest multinational, which is GlaxoSmithKline in India.
ओके।
So this is a very interesting story that how in 47 the Indian pharma sector was totally dominated by the foreign companies, and Indian companies were very weak and very small. And how did they achieve this position within India, first of all? And then how did they achieve a position in the world market that today they are being called the pharmacy of the world?
राइट।
Just like India is being, China is called the factory of the world, and India is also called the services capital or the back office of the world. So, like
राइट।
that, it is also being called pharmacy of the world. So, this is an interesting small story which we can discuss today, how they achieved this.
राइट।
Uh, G.
तो आपकी इस वक्त जो फार्मास्यूटिकल्स की एक्सपोर्ट्स की वर्थ है, नेट वर्थ, वो है $25 बिलियन,
जी
और
जी
मुल्क के अंदर भी इतनी ही मेडिसिन जो है वो इस्तेमाल की जाती हैं।
जी
तो बड़ी बड़ी आपकी कौन सी मार्केट्स हैं, कहां तक जाती हैं इंडियन मेडिसिन? मैंने सुना है कि अफ्रीका में बहुत ज्यादा पॉपुलर हैं इंडियन मेडिसिन।
Yes, Africa, most of the, then even Latin America, Russia, but the fastest growing market is America and Canada and UK.
हम्म।
These are the fastest growing markets, uh, and uh, and these are very advanced markets. But there is a great demand for generic medicines. India is basically exporting generic medicines
हम्म।
and vaccines. In vaccines, again, more than 70% of all the vaccines which WHO buys and distributes is comes from India. So you can say that in the world market, more or less 60% of the vaccines are from India.
और ये भी आप बता रहे थे मुझे कि बहुत से लोग अमेरिका से आते हैं और बहुत ज्यादा मेडिसिन यहाँ से लेके चले जाते हैं और वो कहते हैं कि हमारा हवाई जहाज का खर्चा इससे पूरा हो जाता है। वो क्या स्टोरी है?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know that earlier in the 80s and 90s, a lot of Russian tourists used to come because I found in parts of Delhi that the price of medicines outside many pharmacies was written in Russian. So I
हम्म,
asked them why, because they said a lot of Russians come and buy the medicines and go.
ओके,
But now
ओके,
I heard that this is also happening in a big way from America, because
हम्म,
compared to the Europe and America, the India has one of the cheapest medicines in the world, and the way they have achieved it, that is also very remarkable. In fact, you can say this is all because of the cleverness of the Indian chemists, and now that is first factor, and second
हम्म,
factor is the help given to them by the Indian government. So I'll explain to them how this happened.
हाँ, हाँ,
Initially, it started more than 100 years ago. It started
हम्म,
with a very bright chemist in the 1890s called Prafulla Chandra Ray.
हाँ, हाँ,
He is very respectfully called Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray, or the father of modern chemistry in India. He studied in UK and came back in the 1880s, 90s. And then not only he taught chemistry to a lot of students in Calcutta, but also said that we should convert our knowledge into products useful to people. So he started the first pharmaceutical company in India in 1900. It was became a private limited company in 1900. It was called Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals. So you can say Indian pharma industry starts from there, from Acharya Praful Chandra Ray's company called Bengal Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals in Calcutta. And he passed away in 1945, around that time. So around that till that time, Bengal Chemicals was a profitable pharmaceutical company, you know. And other pioneering company was by another chemist called K. Hamid, Khwaja Ahmad Hamid, and
जी,
in 1935 he established a company called CIPLA, CIPLA, chemicals, industrial, pharmaceutical labs, and something like that. That was the CIPLA meant that. He
हम्म,
started it in Mumbai, and he was very much involved in the freedom movement also. So he was quite close to Gandhi and Nehru and all that. And later he was involved with Professor Zakir Hussain in the establishment of Jamia Millia Islamia, which is a very well-known university in Delhi and all that. He was an educationist. And his son, Yusuf Hamid, he was also a
या,
brilliant chemist. He studied in Cambridge, he did his PhD in Cambridge,
या,
and medicinal chemist. So he carried it forward and took it to very new heights and became world famous. I'll tell you his story separately later,
या,
why he became famous, you know.
and he is 87-year old
Yes,
today.
yes, yes. And he was from very beginning very much against the concept of patents.
हम्म,
You know, that patents means monopoly, and you cannot have monopoly in the when you're dealing with the lives of people and the illnesses of people. So it is
right,
not an industry to make super profits. You can
हम्म,
make profit, but you cannot make super profits, and patents means super profits and monopoly. So he was advocating against the patents, and basically all these very clever chemists and entrepreneurs got together and advised the government of India
हम्म,
in Mrs. Indira Gandhi's time that we should not accept the patent law, the Western patent law. Now,
ओके,
to give you a little background, Western patent law basically was formulated by the advanced industrial countries of Europe in Paris in 1883.
हम्म,
So it is called the Paris Convention regarding industrial property and all that. Okay, so basically it came to be known as trade secrets, copyright, patents, and all that. Now, interestingly, That time that convention was came into being to target America.
Mm-hmm.
Be- because at that time the Europeans were complaining that Americans are stealing their technology and copying it, and without paying any royalty. So all the
Interesting.
Europeans got together and passed this law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And today, of course, America says other people are stealing its technology and all that, copying it. But that time, that whole patent law came up targeting America by the Europeans. And in that, they what was the basic feature of that, especially regarding drugs, was that if somebody discovers a drug molecule, chemical molecule which is effective for a particular disease, etc., then nobody else can make it without paying royalty to these people. For first of all, these the original inventor will have a monopoly for 10 to 12 years. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
after that, the patent will expire generally. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, every company tries to extend the patent by a few more years by doing slight modification here, modification there. So, to get a patent, first of all, you have to prove that your discovery is something novel and something useful, etc. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, novelty is very important. Proving novelty of something. So nobody else should have had that, or no, it should not be published anywhere. It should not be for example, if you say so and so therapy is there in, let's say, in Unani or in Ayurveda and all that, you cannot patent it. Okay, because that is traditional medicine. From that, you cannot patent it. It's already known. So you should come up with something not known so far. Okay, that kind of a solution. So that is the meaning of patent. So, what they said is the molecule, if the molecule is new, then nobody else can make it till the patent expires. Now, what this is called product patent, means the product itself, nobody can make it. Now, what the Indians argued in 1960s is that suppose I can make that product with a better process than you,
Mm-hmm.
better route, more safer route, cheaper route, then
Uh-huh.
that is also novelty. That is also something new. So there should be process patent and product patent.
Okay.
And then they formulated a law in India in 1970, it was passed, called the Indian Patent Act, which did not recognize product patents.
Mm-hmm.
It only recognized process patents.
Okay.
Now,
So,
at that time, they were able to do it. Defying all the other countries, normal convention, and so that led to a huge upsurge in the Indian drug industry, because now Indians, there are a lot of very good chemists, and in fact, many of them started pharmaceutical industry. Okay, just like Dr. Hamid was a very good chemist. Similarly, Dr. D.B. Gupta was a very good chemist. He started Lupin Laboratories. Dr. Reddy was a very good chemist. Anji Reddy, he started Dr. Reddy's laboratory, and so on. Okay,
mm,
there are many scientist entrepreneurs who got into this pharma business, and they initially got some loans from banks and all that, and they were able to establish these pharmaceutical things, but they were able to come up with a innovative process to make the same medicine. Okay.
अच्छा कान्वी जी ये बताएं कि जब ये लॉ बना तो वेस्टर्न जो फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनीज थी उन्होंने डेफिनेटली प्रोटेस्ट तो किया होगा, तो क्या
जी
उन्होंने बाइकआउट तो नहीं किया इंडिया का कि भाई हम नई जो ड्रग्स हैं आपके पास भेजेंगे ही नहीं ताकि आप उनको हमारा पेटेंट जो है उसको डिनाई ना कर दें? और यहाँ पे मुझे फिर याद आता है ऐसे भी सेल्फलेस ह्यूमन बीइंग्स हुए हैं,
जी
अलेक्जेंडर फ्लेमिंग जैसे, जिन्होंने
जी जी
पेंसिलिन डिस्कवर की, जिनको
जी
नोबेल प्राइज मिला 1945 में और जिनकी
जी
डेथ हुई 1955 में। ही वाज बोर्न इन स्कॉटलैंड और उन्होंने पेटेंट क्लेम ही नहीं किया। वाजंट
जी
ही अ ग्रेट ग्रेट ह्यूमन बीइंग?
Of course. There are very few like that who actually have made sure that their discoveries are meant for all humanity and did not make profit out of it. And in fact, Fleming did his research during the First World War, and as soon as it was approved, it saved thousands and thousands of people's lives during the war. Penicillin saved the many lives.
Mhm.
Now this using this thing that every country has a right, sovereign right, to pass its own patent law. So
Mhm.
Indians passed this law. So of course multinationals had a lot of misgivings about it, complained about it, but they couldn't do anything about it. So they started staying away from the Indian market, at least as with the new drugs. They'll only sell
Mhm.
the old drugs, you know, because they'll say if you bring in new drug, the Indian companies will make the same drug with a different route, and
Mhm.
they will do. Since our patent does not hold good in India, they
Mhm.
will file their own patent for a new process and then produce it at 1/10 the price.
Mhm.
So they started, but then India could not export it
Mhm.
to other countries where the patent was valid. So, but first of all, Indian companies started making large number of such drugs. So today, it is said that more than 60,000 drugs are being produced within India by
Mhm.
different companies. Okay, so you can say this was the cleverness of the Indian chemists which
Mhm.
led to this establishment of Indian drug industry and which took on the multinationals within the Indian market. Then what they started doing in the 80s, late 80s onwards, is to once the patent has expired,
Mhm.
then you can sell it in you can sell that in any market also. So they started selling patent expired drugs in
Mhm.
America and England and all that. So the original inventors of these drugs started filing cases against them
Uh-huh.
in the American courts,
Okay.
but they lost the cases.
Mhm.
Indian companies were able to prove in American courts that their technology was superior, their processes were superior, safer, cheaper, and they are not dumping, and that they should be allowed to sell. And they won the
Mhm.
case. There are a number of famous cases which Indian companies won at that time.
Okay.
So when the American companies realized it, that this Indian chemistry is really good and we cannot fight them, then why not join them? You know.
Mhm.
So they started making joint ventures with these Indian companies. For example,
Oh.
there was a famous company from Punjab called Ranbaxy.
Mhm.
Okay, they had come out with a new process. There was famous company called Eli Lilly in America, which had come
Mhm.
out with a new drug called Cefaclor. Now, Cefaclor was a $1 billion drug and very profitable. And Ranbaxy was able to make it with a different process and started selling it. So, Eli Lilly did its best to fight that in courts. They could not. Then finally, they
Mhm.
said, let's make a joint venture.
Okay. So in English they say if you can't beat them, join them.
Exactly. And same thing happened when Abbott Laboratories had come out with a new painkiller called ibuprofen.
Mhm.
And Dr. Reddy's started not only making and selling in India, but went to America and started selling ibuprofen at much lower price.
Mhm.
So, so sorry, not was it Abbott or Boots? I don't remember now
Mhm.
exactly. I can check it out. So they filed a case.
Uh-huh.
They filed a case against Dr. Reddy's.
Mhm.
Hello.
G.
Okay. So, um, and they said that Reddy's are dumping the product in American market and they should be banned from selling in American market. But the Reddy showed, proved in the American courts that no, we are making it safer and better and cheaper because our process is better than you. We are not dumping anything. you know. So it was an anti-dumping case which the Reddies won by showing that their process is better and that's why it is cheaper. So like this, when that is how slowly Indian companies establish themselves in now off-patent drugs. So these are called generic drugs because now the patent is gone. Now you can make the same chemical through different route or and so on. So now what has happened is 95% of all the drugs are actually off patent.
Mhm.
So you can just keep making generic drugs and you're quite okay. And
Okay.
any new drug also becomes off patent within a few years. So what Indian companies do, and in fact all generic manufacturers, is that they keep studying that drug, they analyze it, they develop their own process and keep quiet. And the day that patent gets over, they file an application in America saying that we can produce it. This is our application for producing the drug because patent is
Mm-hmm.
off. That is called ANDA,
Mm-hmm.
stands for abbreviated new drug application. ANDA. Okay,
Very, very
abbreviated,
smart.
very smart. And if you
Yeah.
get that, then you get, if you that gets approved by the Food and Drug Administration (FDA),
Mm-hmm.
then you can make it and sell it there. You know,
Okay.
and you get certain protection also for a few years. You
Mm-hmm.
know, marketing protection, etc. So Indians have learned this game very well. Not only they have
Mm-hmm.
better chemistry, and now what they do is they invite all these European and American drug administrations to come and visit their inspect their manufacturing facilities in India, factories in detail, and see that they are of the same standard as the American factories.
Mm-hmm.
So then, if it is, then FDA approves it. So there are more than 100 FDA approved factories in India. That
Interesting.
means, that means the Food and Drug Administration has accepted that the Indian manufacturing practices are safe and they are good, as good as the Americans. Okay.
Okay.
So once you have that certificate, then you can export what you have made there in those plants. So clever chemistry and learning all this thing about patents, which patent,
Mm-hmm.
which drug, is going off patent when, preparing for it, filing all the applications, regulatory
Mm.
approvals. All this game, the Indian companies have become very good at it. Number of Indian
Okay.
companies. So that is how they started exporting, off patent drugs. Then what
G.
happened? Then what happened is in 1995, India joined the WTO,
Mm-hmm.
and WTO said you have to accept product patent now. You have to change your patent law.
Mm-hmm.
So India had to accept the product patent law, and it passed that in 2005. And they were given 10 years time from 95 to 2005 to make the transition. So after 2005, they cannot violate the product patent in India. Okay, both in
Uh-huh.
India and outside. So but the industry was prepared by that time. Indian industry was prepared. They also started investing in their own R&D to come out with new drugs. Now unfortunately no new drug has come out of Indian companies so far, I mean in the last 10 years. Earlier a few drugs have come from research laboratories. A few drugs have come, but from the Indian companies recently, no new drug has come. But still, they are filing hundreds of patents every year. Indian companies are filing international patents every year,
Mm.
hundreds of them. Okay, on different aspects of the pharmaceuticals products and processes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now other thing that happened was the AIDS epidemic. So when AIDS epidemic spread, especially in Africa and also in United States, and then in other continents, the price of AIDS treatment was about $50 per day.
50.
Dollars per day.
Uh-huh.
That was the price of treatment. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there was no cure, but it will stop it, and that sort of thing. So Indian companies like Cipla, that is how Yusuf Hamid became famous. The person who had challenged all these monopoly patents, he said that I'll make $1 a day. I'll make and
Uh-huh.
sell you $1 a day. And
Mm.
Africans welcomed him. In fact, he's greatly honored in Africa, South Africa, and very other countries. You know,
And
because
he
he
also
literally,
got and he also got Padam Bhushan in India.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's highly
Mm.
regarded and all over the world. And but now the very Bill Clinton Foundation, Bill Gates Foundation started buying all the medicines from him and distributing them in America, in
Mhm.
Africa,
Okay.
because it was an epidemic. AIDS had to be stopped. And if you had left it to American multinationals, nobody could afford that in third world countries, you know. So
Okay.
that is how Cipla became very famous. Then also Cipla started making many important anti-cancer drugs, plant-based anti-cancer drugs, and so on, from Vincristin, Vinblastin, this from Taxol, all these things, and they were very important, crucial, life-saving drugs in cancer treatment. So that is how Cipla made its name. Similarly, one of the big diseases which we are fighting in poorer countries is TB. But unfortunately, like there is no new research in TB after 1950s. The last drug which was invented for TB was back in 1950s. Same thing with leprosy and all that. Okay, because they are considered as poor man's diseases, poor countries' diseases. So no advanced country is ready to invest in that. So Lupin came up with became the biggest producer of TB drugs, and particularly multiple drugs packages, so that even if you are resistant to one drug, then you can take these these combinations, and you can still fight the TB. So that's how
Okay.
Lupin made a niche in the TB drugs, and it is still the one of the biggest producers of anti-TB drugs in the world.
अच्छा, कानवी जी, एक तो मुझे बताइएगा कि एक बोहरा कम्युनिटी से ताल्लुक रखने वाले एक बिजनेसमैन हैं, हबील खुराकी वाला,
जी जी जी।
और वो ही इज अबाउट 81 ईयर ओल्ड,
या
मुंबई में रहते हैं। उनके
जी
बारे में बताइएगा। उनकी भी बड़ी मशहूर एक फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी है। और फिर पिछले दिनों खबरें आई थी कि
जी
इंडिया क्या एक मेडिसिन है जिससे कुछ डेथ्स हुई, कफ सिरप था शायद, वो क्या स्टोरी है?
जी जी जी। So first of all, Habil Khorakewala and this, they have a group called Wockhardt.
हम्म
Wockardt. Wockhardt.
हम्म
It's
हम्म
difficult spelling, difficult to pronounce. But they have a company which produces generic drugs, and they also have a whole chain of hospitals, Wockhardt hospitals, owned by them.
हम्म हम्म
And in fact, recently, 5 years back or so, his name appeared in the Forbes billionaire list also. So they are doing very well. They are doing very well. Work hard. Now, other segment. There are two other segments which I should mention it now. They are newer segments. One is the vaccines. So this vaccine research, though it started around 1900 in the British times when the plague was there, but commercial exploitation of vaccines started in big way quite recently. In the last 20-30 years, you must have heard about Serum Institute in Pune, owned by Poonawalla family. Then several biotech companies came. Again, they were mostly scientists. Shanta Biotech, Bharat Biotech, Panacea Biotech, e-biologicals, and so on. So these are many new biotech companies which have come and started making a lot of vaccines. Vaccines against hepatitis, vaccines for all the diphtheria and all those vaccines, BCG vaccines. And of course, the big story was during COVID, India produced lots of vaccines, and more than 240 million vaccines they sent to other countries, and some of them were free, and others were at a very nominal price.
हम्म
More than 2 billion people in India itself were vaccinated. More than 2 billion vaccines were used in India. That means first round, second round, and some people even got a third round, a booster
हम्म
dose. So that is how they were able to contain the deaths and reduce the number of deaths due to COVID in India. So now more than 60% of the vaccines in the world are from India now.
हम्म
So and they are going not only to all the poorer countries but all the advanced countries also. So that is another new sector. And third sector is this again based on molecular biology, genetics, and things like that. Now these are new fields. In fact, if you remember the gene research itself, that what is a gene, what is it, structure of the gene, DNA and or DNA structure and all that. They were done in the 40s and 50s. Crick and Watson got the Nobel Prize for it. I think 48 or 50 k aspas.
Mm-hmm.
So, so the molecular biology is a new subject, whereas
Mm-hmm.
chemistry is an old subject, which there are very a lot of Indian institutions were also there. Okay, both in universities and research institutions of the government, all of them pulled together, and then industry itself had a lot of good chemists. Now, this molecular biology was a new thing, and that, in fact, was you can say the pioneer in that in India was one of the early molecular biologists called Obaid Siddiqui. He was again in Cambridge. He was very bright, and Baba
Mm.
identified him and told him, "Why don't you come here and establish a molecular biology lab?" And that is how he joined Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which you are familiar with,
Mm.
TIFR, and he
Yeah.
started the first molecular biology lab in 1961 ke aspas in India. And from there, now a whole bunch of dozens of world-class molecular biology labs are operating in India, doing research, pure research, and then that has had its effect on the industry also. So now
Mm-hmm.
that is the other industry which is growing very well. In fact, one of the big companies I mentioned, Biocon, is in using that kind of biotechnology, molecular biotechnology, and that is started by an entrepreneur scientist, a woman entrepreneur scientist called Kiran Muzumdar. She is a pioneer in that, and now there are hundreds of other biotechnology companies coming up, and good molecular biology research is going on in many labs in India, government funded labs also. So,
अच्छा, कान्वी जी, सॉरी फॉर इंटरप्शन। ये
जी,
बताइएगा कि कितनी डेथ्स हुई थी कोविड की इंडिया में? इनिशियली कहा जा रहा था कि देयर आर सो मेनी डेथ्स एंड द फिगर्स आर बीइंग डाउनप्लेड, और उनको कम बताया जा रहा है। और कफ सिरप वाला वो बताइएगा, कुछ
हाँ
डेथ्स हुई
हाँ,
थी, कहाँ पे हुई वो?
G, G, G. So let's first deal with the cough syrup and these business.
हम्म,
See, what
हाँ
is
हाँ।
happening is that the just like there is a Food and Drug Administration in the US, there are similarly drug controllers offices in India, and without their permission, you cannot make and sell drugs. Now, same thing applies to drugs which are for export also. But then there are some unscrupulous fellows who may not be following the best practices. Now, in some
हम्म।
cases, what happens is some of these chemicals are very nazuk. That
हम्म।
means slight mixture, impurities in that can lead to disastrous effects. So some of these syrups and some eye drops, these are had some dangerous variant chemical, in that, and
हम्म।
that is due to poor supervision,
हम्म।
and so government is very, the industry is worried, people are worried, and also government is taking strict action against them, so that such unscrupulous fellows will not be able to manufacture and either sell in India or abroad.
हम्म।
Otherwise, the medicines themselves are approved, but then in the manufacturing, you have to be extremely careful. So
यस।
you should have properly certified what is called good GMP, that is good manufacturing practices. And only with that certification, those companies should be allowed to export. So that is a big issue is being addressed now. Now, COVID. I think the reported deaths of COVID in India is about 5 lakhs or something like that,
हम्म।
and it's still very large. Though compared to population of India, it is less, because if you look at it, America had much more than double that. More than, if you look at, and America has four times, one fourth the population of India. So that way, per million population, if you see, the deaths were less, but still it is quite a lot. And but
हम्म।
timely use of vaccines prevented any large scale, epidemic damage to the working population in India. And it is difficult to identify which death is due to COVID, and which death is due to some other comorbidities. So it's a tricky question.
Mhm. So, any final thoughts, Kanaviji, before we conclude the show?
When you talk about knowledge economy,
Mm,
knowledge based industry, science based industry, and all that,
mm,
normally people talk only about IT and software and
mm,
these things. But pharma industry is equally knowledge based, and the new biotech industry is also equally cutting edge knowledge based. So
mm,
so far there has been less appreciation of that, but now it is growing very fast. And in fact, the prediction recently I saw is that by 2030, the pharma production will be 5 times what it is now. So today, if it is about 50 billion, it will be about 250 billion,
mm.
and the exports will also go up like that. So this is the prediction now. Yes,
So, thank you very much, Professor Kanaviji.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.